All right, man, we are back again for another episode. And you think by now I would have remembered what episode number we were on, but it appears some things never change. We are on episode number 28 of the Cozy Corner of Cinema. Hope your week has been well. Hope you've been working hard on whatever it is you need to work on because the work has to get done, and it's not going to get done if you're sitting around doing nothing, man. Oh man, I tell you, what a week it's been. This past week or so has been very tiring, but also very productive. A lot has been watched, a lot has been worked on. It's uh, it's been great, man. There's been a good even balance of working on the writing as well as watching. Some good stuff watched this week. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about that. I don't know if I had mentioned before, man, that I had finished. I had mentioned before I was going through Russ Meyer's filmography because I hadn't been familiar with a lot of his work. I hadn't seen a lot of his work. And the past probably a little less than a year or so, I've gone through all of his feature films. Um, I, uh, I said no shorts or documentaries, so just his 21 primary feature films. And I ended that about a week or so ago. And I think I may have actually finished it before I recorded. You know what? That's right, man. I finished his filmography before I even um, recorded last week. Oh, don't mind that. Peeling off a thing. Um, but yeah, so I'd gone through them all, and it's interesting, man, how his career. So his last feature film was Beneath the Valley of the Ultra Vixens in 1979, and at least that's where I'm kind of cutting it off because I think he may have had something else after that I'm not exactly counting. I believe it was a documentary. Um, on IMDb, it lists a couple things. A couple documentaries: Mondo Topless 2, Melissa Mound's The Breast of Russ Meyer, and Pandora Peaks. I don't really know what the breast of Russ Meyer is, to be honest, and there's not a lot of information. Okay, apparently it wasn't completed. So when it comes to his primary filmography, that's where I am ending it there. And he's an interesting guy, man. It is funny to see the evolution of what was socially acceptable on screen from his earlier work in films like The Immoral Mr. Tease and or Mr. Tease and His Playthings, as it's often gone by, and just the how more sexually explicit his films got into the later years of films like two films I had talked about, Super Vixens and Up, uh, of just how out there those films got. And if I'm looking at his overall filmography, I think he's a filmmaker whose work I appreciate more than I enjoy. He's somebody who definitely, in terms of cult cinema and exploitation cinema, definitely deserves to be amongst the most influential in terms of a lot of the nudity that he was putting on screen and a lot of the ways that a lot of the transgressive kind of images he was putting into his films, pushing the way for what was socially acceptable because by the time that he was out with Beneath the Valley of the Ultra Vixens, I mean, this is 1979, and we're pretty much, we're in the golden age of porn right here, and the films never, from what I can remember, I don't know if they ever got hardcore or not. I think there may have been some moments, but truthfully, some of the films start to blend together, and I don't exactly remember a lot of these. A lot of his earlier work I find to be pretty forgettable. I mentioned before that I think the history of the nudie cuties and those kinds of films are interesting more so than actually sitting down to watch the films because although a lot of them are fairly short in runtime, only about 60 minutes or so, maybe 70 minutes, they do drag quite a bit because a lot of the film is the aura of wow, I'm seeing a nude woman on screen, man. This is like forbidden, and now it's so obviously so tame that I mean there's stuff on TV now that would be considered, you know, insane back in the day, and obviously you can't compare any sort of sentiments now. To what was socially acceptable then in terms of what was available, what was allowed to be shown on screen. More so in the fact that if you're around in the 60s and you're watching these films, you're like, wow, I'm seeing something that I can't see anywhere else. Or you go to see a lot of the Mondo films and you're like, wow, I'm seeing parts of the world that, you know, a big part of it is that for a lot of these people who are going to see these films, not just you know, Mondo films or these nudie cutie kind of films, but really any kind of films in the 50s and 60s and all these eras, is that you're seeing, they're like travel logs. You're seeing parts of the world. You're seeing characters go off to Paris and Italy and these fantastic locations that you would have even imagined or dreamed of going to see. It's kind of like you watch these films maybe in your small town at the local cinema. I picture a cinema like in the Last Picture show or something like that, and you're just transported. I love watching films that were filmed in real locations with real people. And what I say by that is you watch a film like Midnight Cowboy and you know they're going out there and they're just in the crowd with real people, and you're watching the real people who are there at the time in that time period. Or if the cameras weren't there and the actors weren't there and stuff, these are just the people who would be there regardless. And I find that so interesting and fascinating. It's like just totally looking at more so than just seeing an old film, but you know that's on a set or is on a, you know, a place without many people. You watch these films. You watch many films where you have characters who like are walking down. You know, I love it when characters in films they're like walking down a street and the director is filming them from a car. So you're just seeing the people around and you're seeing the marquees of all these films and all the adult films and the bookstores. And gosh, man, it's just so fascinating now that more so than you know, when you look at somebody now who like you know 5-6 years ago was filming something in, you know, in some city. It's like, yeah, I mean that's cool, but I don't know, man. Something about it, the fact it's on film and the fact you're seeing something that, you know, before you're even born, these are the people that are there. Man, I tell you, it is truly an experience that only cinema can deliver. But what I was saying with a lot of these films is that they are, in a way, they are interesting. I think if you're somebody who is into the nudie cuties kind of films, you know, Russ Meyer is somebody who I think everybody who is into cult cinema is familiar with. He's by no means an obscure artist, but if you haven't seen a lot of his early work, I mean, I truthfully don't know if I could recommend going through them all. I think there are a couple of films in his early work that I find pretty good. Like I said, I do like Mr. T's and his playthings, and he has some others there that I find interesting. I'm kind of blanking on which ones were which. You know, a lot of the early work kind of blends together for me, but a lot of it is just you got to sit through a lot of just not too terribly interesting stuff. The allure of a nude woman is almost immediately gone watching this in 2022. So stretching that out to an hour, and oftentimes with poor comedy, it just doesn't work out, man. It really does feel like a chore. I watched something recently, man, in that 3D nudie cutie set from Kino. Not the Coppola film that I mentioned before. It was the other film on that set. I totally do not remember the name of it, but man, it was just not interesting. Yeah, man, looking at his later career though, he is somebody who it's interesting because I don't think he ever really had a consistent run of quality. You know, he was definitely. I look at some films. Kind of. I mean, you could probably say Faster Pussycat, but I think even Mudhoney is an interesting kind of turn to the next stage of his career, and I know a lot of people enjoy. What the hell's the name of that film? I think it's Lorna that a lot of people enjoy, and I like that film quite a bit too. But I I guess maybe you can look at that as the shifting point from his early nudie cutie work to his later work. But even from there, you know, he does Faster Pussycat, which is his best film in my opinion. I think it has the most interesting, memorable characters. It kind of blends everything you want in a Russ Meyer film. I don't remember if there was even any nudity in it, to be honest. There may have been, but you know, you have girls who or yeah, you have girls who aren't gonna, who can defend themselves and but are also bastards, and you have the guys in that film who are also bastards, and you have fast cars and kick-ass violence, man. It's a great film, man. But then from there, some of his other stuff I just don't find too terribly interesting. Stuff like, I don't know, man, like Common Law Cabin. I just really didn't do much for me. But from there, we see a lot of his films that start to blend more elements of violence. What was that, Cherry, Harry, and Raquel? I remember had some wild moments, and same with Vixen. And I mentioned before, you get Up and Super Vixens, and it just totally goes off the rails, man. I mentioned before, Super Vixens has just that insane sequence in the bathroom, man. I mean, holy moly, man! What he was so he obviously got much better at directing violence, man, because it's violent, but it's absurd. It just goes completely insane in that film, and I talked about that before. And I mentioned Up from 1976 and how just crazy that gets in the third act, man. And even, I guess the big one, Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, which I like that film. I'm not quite in the love category, but I understand the appeal. But that's a film as well that you have this kind of hippie film, and then at the end, I mean, it does start out with a flash forward, but at the end of the film, it gets totally off the rails in a way where, I mean, the name Valley of the Dolls is totally out the window, man. If you watch, I feel bad for the guy who goes to, or the girl who are probably more like it, who what liked Valley of the Dolls and was like, oh, I love that book. I'm gonna go see another film with Valley of the Dolls in it, and then you go see it and you're like, what is going on, man? What is happening, man? It's an interesting kind of shift in a way you can look, because Valley of the Dolls, what was that, 1968, 1967? Either way, Beyond the Valley of the Dolls obviously came after the horrific Tate murders, so it is interesting to see how Valley of the Dolls is a very melodramatic, kind of silly, tepid melodrama, and then Beyond the Valley of Dolls, it's like a shifting of the tides after the horrific violence that occurred in real life. Now you have this horrific violence on screen. That's a whole conversation right there. Kind of the shift in the cultural tide that was from not just the horrific murders, but also just the shift in changing sensibilities of the 60s to the 70s, a darker period, but that whole period has been well documented before. Two of the books that I had read this year go into it quite a bit. Actually, I would say three of the books, really. I mentioned the Michael Cimino book, mentions it because Michael Cimino was working, obviously in the early 70s, co-wrote Silent Running and then directed Deer Hunter, and what happened to his career after that, and also read Leave the Gun, Take the Cannoli, about the making of The Godfather, and it goes into about Coppola coming to Hollywood, making his films, Finian's Rainbow, the Bellboy and His Playgirls, or what the hell's the name of that film? I may mess that film up, and oh god, Finian's Rainbow. Oh geez, Louise, man, someone's yelling at me. It's this film. I apologize. I'm blanking on the name of the film, but kind of that shift. He was coming into Hollywood at the time in '72 with The Godfather, and then also the book, one of the best things I ever read. I mentioned before. I've talked about it on multiple episodes. If you're interested, you can go back on those. But Killing for Culture, From Edison to ISIS, which is just I think it's just one of the best things I've ever read in my life. It's such a comprehensive and fantastic breakdown of the history of death on screen, real death, and it goes into from obviously from the early days of moving of being able to capture things on film to as recent as the horrific videos are being put online by the terrorist groups. If you get a chance to read that book, man, you have to read it, man. You know what, man, you ain't gonna be reading that in one weekend, let me tell you that. It's definitely something that you're gonna be spending a lot of time on, but my gosh, man, if you have any interest at all in any of the deathhumentary, shockumentary, Mondo kind of stuff, they spend a lot of time on those, especially, and then it goes later on into some of the real life stuff that was happening on the internet and stuff, which it's pretty crazy, man. Some of the stuff that's in there, I haven't seen any of those videos. I have no interest in seeing that kind of stuff, but they talk about what's in those videos, and I just read it and I'm like, yeah, I don't I'm glad I never watched these, man, because the mental image of what happens is bad enough, man. And I've talked about that more in depth. I've gone very off topic now from Russ Meyer to this, but Russ Meyer, he's just one of these guys who you know what, he did his thing. It was a right time and a right place. Whether or not many of his films hold up is entirely subjective, man. I think besides Faster Pussycat, Super Vixens, and Up, I don't know if there's a lot that would really go back to. And these films aren't coming to Blu-ray anytime soon. Besides Beyond the Valley of the Dolls and the hell's that film? The 7 Minutes. I almost said the 7 Ups. Does the 7 Minutes have a Blu-ray? I don't know. I think it has a DVD because those are both Fox films. And Beyond the Valley of the Dolls has a Criterion. Written by Roger Ebert, RIP there. But yeah, man. If you're at all into cult cinema, you already know Russ Meyer. Maybe you've seen a film of his. But hey, man, check him out. He's an interesting guy who was at the right time, making different kinds of films, and even looking at the socio, I guess, political aspect of it. You could say, people kind of feel one way or another about how, his representation of some of these women on screens. Some people find it empowering, other people find it derogative, or not derogative. You know what I'm talking about. I don't know what the word I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, man. I apologize. I'm rambling on, but either way, man, he's definitely somebody who I'm really, although not all his films for me, I am very happy that I finally have a good knowledge now of his work, and I am definitely going to be reading that book that came out. What was it? Big Bosoms and Glass Jaws, or Square Jaws, or not Glass Jaws. You know what I'm talking about, man. Forgive me, man. But yeah, interesting guy. And I rolled up, I rolled up like a bunch of filmmakers whose work I wasn't super familiar with for next. And my next filmmaker that I'm going to watch through is John Sayles, because I have only seen, I think, one of his films, and he is somebody who I know there's a lot of blind spots there, and I think I need to correct. So, looking forward to going from a cult filmmaker like Russ Meyer to an acclaimed filmmaker like John Sayles. Russ Meyer acclaimed as well, but in his own right, in different circles. But either way, yeah, man, check his stuff out. Faster Pussycat, Kill la Kill, Super Vixens, and Up, I think are pretty easily findable online. Or that website that I mentioned before has that box set where you can just pretty much get them all. So, yeah, man, that's gonna be that for Russ Meyer. So, it's crazy, man, how fast this month is coming up. So the end of the month, we have the top 10 of 2018 coming, and I still feel like there's so much I have to still watch, man. It's almost overwhelming, man. I'm only at 52 films right now, and I just gotta push on through because right now I have if I were to stop right here, I would have a confident top 10, and there's still so many films I have to see. So I'm looking at my top 10 right here, man, and I think all 10 of these films I'd be confident in saying are great films, and I still have much more to see, man. So looking forward to going on with that. New releases this year, man. I tell you, I was talking about this with somebody yesterday. There's been a lot of great freaking films this year, man. And the issue is that there's a lot of films that I see counted as 2021 that got released here in 2022. So, when I'm not gonna do an end of the year list. I feel like everybody is doing those, but I think what I might do at the end of the year, if you guys are interested or not, is kind of talk about maybe 10 films that maybe you heard about and you didn't see, or maybe 10 films that went under your radar. Because there's been a couple films already this year that I have seen that I thought were just fantastic that I've seen accidentally or just happened to come across them pop up on like streaming services like available to rent, and it's a real shame that a lot of these films really are just kind of getting not really getting any talk, like I mentioned before a couple weeks ago when I was just scrolling on Amazon seeing what new releases there were, and I saw that Montana Story was already on there, and I talked about that for a whole episode and how much I love that film, and it was only $1 to rent, and I'm just like, man, that no one is talking about this film. I've seen some films recently past couple months that I thought like, man, these are great films, but no one's really mentioning them. And there's still plenty of great stuff to come out this year, man. I tell you, I was at the cinema yesterday and they're already showing before the film they show like screenshots of or pictures of what's going to be coming soon. So they had stuff like Decision to Leave, the new Park Chan-wook film, and my most hyped film of the year, The Banshees of Inisherin, by Martin McDonagh. And I think I'm definitely going to rewatch probably Three Billboards before I see Banshees, because I've seen in Bruges. I've talked about a bunch. It's one of my favorite films ever. I think it's a modern masterpiece. And Seven Psychopaths I really think is just such a funny and fun movie. And Three Billboards is one that I'm a big fan of as well. That I'd only seen once in theaters, but I have not. I have the Blu-ray, but I read an interesting article, and I'm not going to really get into this or not, but it's because I kind of talked a little bit about it last week in terms of the kind of reaction that people have online to films, and that you really have to kind of not take it too seriously. But I was reading an article where Martin McDonough was kind of talking about the response to Three Billboards, and he had mentioned that he was kind of hurt by some of the responses that he had got from the film, because if you haven't seen the film, it's not even a spoiler, but kind of just a character reveal. That basically, there's a character in the film who is a racist and is a bad guy, but the film it does show a different side of him at a certain point without getting into any kind of spoilers or anything like that. And I remember people were having just really just really nonsense kind of reactions, saying the film was racist, or saying the film supported this, and it's all nonsense. And truthfully, I forgot all about that kind of controversy because it's here today, gone tomorrow kind of thing. But I was reading an interview with him, and he was saying how he thought it was just kind of like kind of what I was saying is that people aren't perfect, and no one is black and white. Everybody has these gray areas, and that doesn't mean that they're a good person or not, but they're not what they are in the films, or people are not moralistically good or bad. There is a gray area, and I think that's what I love about that film is really what I love about all his films is I think he's such a strong character writer. And even in Bruges, you have Colin Farrell's character who does something basically unforgivable, but the issue that comes to there is that he also knows it's unforgivable. So it's like you're on his side because you feel for him, but at the same time, it's sort of like, man, it's just a bad circumstance he gets into. But at the same time, he's also a very funny character. He's a very charismatic and just a ridiculous character. But then he does things in the film that's just like, man, And that's why I think, that's why that's where I'm gonna end it. But like I said last week, you gotta see these films and form your own opinions, man. You really can't be going online and seeing the kind of nonsense. Every film's controversial every week. Everything is the best film ever. Everything is the worst film ever. It's just like back in the day on IMDb. You go on those message boards and this is the best. The Dark Knight is the worst film of all time, and the Dark Knight is the best film of all time. And if you disagree, then you're an idiot, and this and that. It's all nonsense, man. It's people who need to go outside, man, who just don't see what really goes into making a film. It's just completely ridiculous. But either way, the Banshees of Inisherin I just cannot wait for, and I don't follow any kind of reviews or anything like that, but I have seen a couple of things pop up saying that it's a great film and stuff. So really looking forward to that. And Triangle of Sadness, which is, you know what, I gotta say, I don't know a thing about it, but I'm on board for it, man, because I remember I heard it winning the Palme d'Or at Cannes, and I was like, oh, cool, I don't know what this is, man. And I've seen, like, a poster, and I've seen 2 seconds of footage, and I'm like, you know what, man, that's good enough for me. I'll be there opening day, I can't wait for that. I'm not always a fan of the films that win the Palme d'Or, but I think the films are always interesting to say the least. What won last year? Titane, I think? And Titane is a film that, you know what, I don't think I loved. I had, some problems with it, but I did like it, man. I thought it was a real cool film, and I think my problem with that film is that it's 2 good films that don't quite mesh together, man. I think the first half is really cool, but a different kind of tone, and the second half, man, there's one sequence with the one character in that film, I think a lot of people probably remember, where he kind of, oh man, he just says something that just is a total gut punch, and I obviously can't give it away because it's a major spoiler, but he says something about how he feels about another character, and it's just like, man, that is so beautiful, Titane, man, the more I thought about that film, I remember when I first walked out of it, I was just kind of like, I don't know. I think more so that the ending I thought was a little cliche. Those kind of big endings that get really big and gooey and stuff, I kind of find a bit of an eye roll at times. I saw a film earlier this year that people really seem to enjoy, and that's great, but I thought the film was okay, but then the ending of the film has to have that big, like, oh, there's this insane moment, and I'm just like, I don't think you really needed this, and I won't say what the name of that film is, maybe I'll wait a little while, but definitely a film that people are really liking. But there are some really solid films, man, that have won the Palme d'Or. I'm looking here, you got Parasite from 2019, which, hey man, won the Best Picture. Fantastic film, man. man, Shoplifters from 2018, which I'm a big fan of. The Square. I haven't seen that film, man. That's a poster I've seen a bunch, and some of these other films I haven't seen. Uncle Boon Me is one that I keep meaning to see because I saw Memoria this year, which, by the way, have two Blu-ray releases in Australia and the UK. I guess that whole thing of only being theatrical was hey man, it worked for me. I mean, I was gonna see it anyways, man. But and then there's some other films here. The Tree of Life, I think, is a masterpiece, and Amor, directed by the great Michael Haneke, or Haneke, how do you say his name? Who, oh man, you guys see that box set that's coming out from Criterion? Oh man, I can't wait for that. You know, the first film I ever talked about on this show is The Seventh Continent. Man, I cannot wait for that box set. And I almost, funny enough, watched Benny's video not too long ago, and then I didn't for some reason. I think I wanted to watch something else, but from what I hear, that's also very good. Blue is the Warmest Color, 2013. Pretty good film as well. I don't think I'm quite in the love category, but I do want to rewatch it. I remember it being a little long, and I know there was a bunch of controversy behind that film, but both great performances by the leads in that film. And some of these other films I haven't seen. Daniel Blake is one I've been wanting to see for a while. Deepan, I'm not familiar with, honestly. And Winter Sleep, I'm also not too familiar with. So it's just interesting that, looking at the kind of the past winners of the Palme d'Or, I find these a bit more interesting than the Academy Award Best Pictures, because although the Best Pictures, a lot of times are great films, or this good films. I mean, you have great stuff like, hey man, Nomadland I thought was a phenomenal film, and that was fantastic that it won Best Picture. But I don't really, a lot of times I just don't really care that much. And not to say the Palme d'Or is like the be all end all. Obviously, like, these aren't my favorite films from that year. Like, I don't think, Parasite wasn't my favorite film of 2019. But hey, man, it's just cool to see these kind of films that, aren't really worried about trying to appeal to a mass audience. They're just filmmakers who want to make the films they want to make, and whether or not you like or dislike them, it's films like these that I think make for the best kind of discussion. That's why films like Titan or The Tree of Life or Blue is the Warmest Color that kind of divide people sometimes, and I find it's like, hey man, check out the film yourself, make your own opinion. Maybe it's almost better off though, hey man, if a film is divisive, I'm almost more interested in it, because hey man, I'm not really going into any sort of clear idea of how to feel about a film. Not that I would, but let's face it, man, sometimes if you hear a film is critically acclaimed or critically lambasted, you're gonna, unbeknownst to you, start to feel a different way, even if you don't want to, man. I mean, it is what it is, man. We're only human, and you know what, man, it's all subjective. But this was a total ramble episode. I truthfully didn't have a really clear idea, but hey man, I think this episode came out pretty good, and I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. Just a heads up, you guys, the next episode of Cozy Corner is coming on the 16th, which is a Sunday, so I will not have the opportunity to record next week. Next week is going to be very busy, but keep an eye out for that on that Sunday. Yeah, man, like I said, things are going fantastic, man. The work is getting done. It's just coming along so good, man. Films are being watched. This is the time to be alive, man. This is the time to do what you want to do, man. And man, just put your freaking mind to it, man, because you put in that time and you put in that effort, you put in that work, it's gonna come back to you, man, tenfold. It's gonna be like, hey man, what you put in there, it's gonna give out. That sounded, does that sound inspirational enough for you? I don't know, man. Well, either way, man, all right. Enjoy this beautiful weather. I know I am. I'm going out to go to the cinema. Oh my gosh, man, beautiful day out today, I tell you. But anyways, I hope you're all doing very well. I hope you're all working hard, all that good stuff. And that's all I got to say, man. So all the best, and cheers.